Hi, I'm Calles de Oro. I want to read you a story. This story is in the book of Ezra in the Bible, and it's kind of like what's happening now to our world, more likely. And I just wanted to read you a story. And this is historical Old Testament that is the resettlement of the Hebrew people in the homeland after the long exile in Babylon. The book is named for its author and central figure, Ezra, the priest, who led the exile to a new commitment to God's law after their return. The structure of the book is the 10th chapter of this book fall naturally into two main divisions. The two division is called the restoration of the temple of God, and the second part is the reformation of the people of God. And it was about 525 BC. Yeah. And one of the most unusual facts about the book of Ezra is that it has two major sections that are separated by a time gap of 80 years. The book opens with a brief introduction that explains how the first return from the exile happened. Cyrus, the king of Persia, issued a proclamation allowing the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple and resettle their native land. About 50,000 people returned under the leadership of Zerubbabel, a Jewish citizen appointed by Cyrus as governor of Jerusalem, arriving in about 525 BC. They set to work immediately on the rebuilding project. In spite of some shrewd political maneuvering by their enemies, the work moved forward until the temple was completed in 515 BC. The second major section of the book reports on the arrival of Ezra in Jerusalem with another group of exile about 60 years after the temple has been completed. Just as Zerubbabel had led the people to rebuild God's house, Israel's mission was to lead his countrymen to rebuild the law of God in their hearts. Israel worked with another Jewish leader, Nehemiah, to bring about several reforms among the Jewish people in Jerusalem. During this period, from the book of Nehemiah, we learn that Israel read the books of the law, which were Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, aloud to the people. This led to a great religious revival throughout Jerusalem as the people committed themselves again to God's law, confessed their sins, and renewed the covenant of the Redeemer God. We also learn from the final chapter of this book that Israel was distressed as the at the Jewish men who had married non-Jewish women. He led these men to repent of their sin and divorce their pagan wives. Israel had traditionally been accepted as the author of the book that bears his name, as well as companion book of Nehemiah. In the Hebrew Old Testament, Ezra and Nehemiah appeared as one broken book, closely connected to theme and style of the books of 1 and 2 of Chronicles. The last two verses of the 2 Chronicles are repeated, and the first 3 verses of the book of Ezra probably indicating that they belong together in one original version. For this reason, many scholars believe that Ezra served as writer and editor compiler of all 4 of these books. 1 and 2 in Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah. They no, he probably drew from official court documents to compile 1 and 2 Chronicles. The completion theory also helped explain the strange 80-year gap between the two major sections of Ezra's book. He probably wrote about Zerubbabel returned many years after it happened, drawing from official court records and some other accounts of the event. To this, he added his own personal memoirs, now contained on chapter 7 through 10 in the book of Ezra, as well as chapter 8 through 10 of the book of Nehemiah. The rest of the material in the book of Nehemiah may have come from Nehemiah's memoirs, which Ezra incorporated into the book of Ezra Nehemiah. The time for the final writing and completion of the material must have been sometime late in the 5th century. And the book of Ezra belongs to the post-exile period. These were the years after a remnant of the nation returned to Jerusalem following the exile, about 50 years in Babylon. The return came about after the defeat of Babylon by the Persian Empire. Unlike the Babylonians, the Persians allowed their subject nations to live in their own native regions around the authority of a ruling governor. The Persians also practiced religious tolerance, allowing each nation to worship its own god. This explains the proclamation of Cyrus of Persia, which allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. Cyrus even returned to the temple treasures that the Babylonians took when they destroyed Jerusalem about 50 years earlier. The theme of the book of Ezra is the restoration of the remnant of God's covenant people in Jerusalem in obedience to his law. The book shows clearly that God had acted to preserve his people, even when they were being held captive in a pagan land. But in the absence, the people had not been able to carry on the true form of temple worship. Only in the temple Jerusalem, they believed, could authentic worship and sacrifice to the Redeemer God be offered. Thus, is this why the rebuilding of the temple was so important. Here, they could restore their worship of God and find the true identity as God's people of destiny in the world. The book of Ezra also teaches a valuable lesson about the providence of God. Several different Persian kings are mentioned in this book. Each king played a significant role in returning to God's covenant people to their homeland and helping them restore the temple at the center of the religious life. This shows that God can use unrighteous as well as righteous to work his ultimate will, the lives of his people. Special consideration. Many scholars believe that Jewish people in Babylon and Persia must number at least 2 million, yet only about 50,000 choose to return to Jerusalem with the first group under Zerubbabel. This indicates that most of them probably have become uncomfortable with their lives in these foreign lands, or perhaps the uncertainties of this present exodus were more appealing with the uncertainties of life in Jerusalem, a city which most of them had never seen. Some Bible readers are bothered by Israel's treatment of the pagan woman whom the Jewish men had married. How could it be so cruel as to insist that these wives be put away, divorced, with no means of support? His action must be understood in light of the drastic situation that faced the Jewish community in Jerusalem following the exile. Only a small remnant of the covenant people had returned, and it was important for them to keep themselves from pagan idolatry and foreign culture influences at all costs. Israel must have realized too that this one was of the problem which had to lead to their downfall and captivity as people in the first place. Yet, even the horrors of defeat and exile by the Babylonians have failed to reach the people as a lesson. He was determined to stamp out the problem this time before it became a widespread practice among God's covenant people.